Ready to be Romanced. I'm Torry.
And I'm Megan.
And today we're discussing
A Court of Wings and
Ruin.
I think maybe that's the best that we've done so far. So kudos to us.
Same. Also, I've been calling it A Court of War and Ruin. And I've been stumbling over saying it. I think I've done that 6 times on the podcast. I've been stumbling over saying it. I was like, this is not easy. And then I was, I don't know, looking at it for some reason, the cover, and I was like, oh, it's because I've been saying the wrong title.
Wrong. Court of Wings and Ruin.
Well,
sure.
we've talked about on this fucking podcast is everything has a million names. City of Starlight, also City of Nightmares, Valaris, but it's also so we're back, baby. We are on the 3rd installment of the ACOTAR series. I truly put off reading this book for weeks.
You did.
I started it a few weeks ago and then just never came back to it. And then I read 3 books in between. And then I was like, oh fuck, I really gotta finish this before the pod. And let me just tell you, I don't even know what I read. It was such a slog that I was I don't know. I just didn't enjoy it.
Yeah, we'll talk about this. I know just before we recorded, I said, are
we going to be honest?
Are we going to be honest about our struggles with this book? And you're like, yeah, of course. Which I'm like, great. And what I came back to with this, my relationship to this book is that when I first read A Court of Thorns and Roses and then A Court of Mist and Fury, the second one, which everybody says is the best one.
Yes.
I did read, I swear I read 85%. When I first got them and my friend gave them to me. And then I'll talk about it later about this one plot point that I thought was going to happen. And it pissed me off too much that I just thought, no, I just won't finish it. And I obviously wasn't attached to it enough that I didn't finish it for years. And then I think I only picked them back up and read them through the full time when it started to get popular on TikTok and people were talking about it a bit more. And I was like, part of this for me is we know that Rhysand and Feyre are together. The resolution of their enemies, kind of sexy, fun, flirty bad boy back and innocent girl changing her powerful change. It's over.
It's so over.
In
it's
terms
so
of
fucking
romance,
over.
it's so over. And so this one really takes on the fantasy, political thing that I think Sarah J. Maas really loves to do, which I think is present in a lot of her other books. That's really fantasy grounded. And I'm when I'm talking with you about this book and having fun about it, I want to talk about the romance. So Absolutely. I think maybe that's where it might have fell flat for us.
100%. Because the first book, it is really fun. I feel like there's aspects that are fun and you want to know how this girl who has, taken care of her family for years fares in this unknown world. And I think that's really fun. And then she kind of is healed by this journey with Tamlin. And then you're thrown through such a ringer in book 2. And because there's so many interesting things about the world, the Weaver and all of that stuff, the Bone Carver, which we get in this, but it's when you're meeting them for the first time, it is really fun and thrilling. You get to meet Tarquin, all these people that are really fun and just cool new characters. And again, we get that a little bit in this book with Hellion and stuff like that, but it's you're totally right. There's no intrigue around Rhys and Feyre. And I usually like watching couples. We lack so much happy couple reading because it's usually just getting to the point where they're together. And so I don't want to dismay it in that point, but it's just it's such a bore to read. We get it. He lets you make your own decisions. We get it. You're
a feminist. No, okay.
Yeah,
let's get into it and talk about some of the plot stuff. But we really pulled out a lot of the romance stuff. I pulled out a lot of romancy quotes and hints at some other pairings that start to flourish in this book. That if anybody knows, get expanded on in further books without being too spoilery. And so I think we'll have fun talking about trash talking, let's be real, but also with a little bit of love because we're still hot for the bad boys.
Absolutely. And I love Faysand. They're one of my favorite couples. I would say, like, you know, reading, but it's like, fucking hell. They're also the most annoying. Okay. Spoiler warning. We will be discussing A Court of Wings and Ruin, but nothing that comes after that. This book is obviously written by Sarah J. Maas. It was published May 2nd, 2017, and it picks up when Feyre is back in Spring Court after that whole debacle with the Cauldron and the King of Highburn. And she's basically just explaining to us how she's been hiding all of her powers, her status of High Lady. She's acting as like she is traumatized from Night Court. And she's just trying to string Tamlin and Lucien along to get more information to bring it back to Rhys and the inner circle.
She's like spy. Like she's living her spy fantasy, double agent. Like I actually love this. This is probably my favorite part of the action part of the book because it like starts really fast. And there's a lot of action. You're like, oh my gosh, what's happening? Because Feyre's back in the Spring Court, but with terrible Tamlin, who we hate now. And I just want to like already complain that part 1, because the books are set up like part 1, part 2, and it's called Princess of Carrion. Here's the 70th name that we can call Feyre.
Yeah, literally, what is that?
Dead animals are like flesh or blood or something, and I googled it just to make sure what the definition of carrion, carrion. The decaying flesh of animals. Anyways.
Dude, I have no idea. But I do like this chunk of the book, you're right, because I think we lost some of the plot in the last third of Akamath or whatever, because that she's like a hunter and she's really strategic, but that was detailed so much in book 1. So I do like that in this book, we get this spy, like a hunter stuff in Spring Court, and then it comes back later when she's like retrieving these monsters to come fight the battles. But basically she sees right through Ianthe and Tamlin, who still is like on good terms with Ianthe, even though he should be mad at her for bringing the sisters into this mess. And Lucien is finally starting to see kind of some of the stuff that Feyre is seeing. Tamlin is still in cahoots with Highburn, who sent his niece and nephew, Princess Branna and Prince Dagdon. I fucking looked up their pronunciations, probably just butchered it, but he sends them to walk the wall, this mysterious wall, and find the holes between the Mortal Lands and Prythian. And it's so funny because every time a book has a map, like I just flip to the next page because I like, don't give a fuck. And then in this whole book, it's like talking about the middle and the Mortal Lands and these other lands that Vasa is in or whatever, like Vasa's hiding in or whatever. And I was just like, fucking beats me. I literally thought it was the courts and the Mortal Lands, and that's it. Like,
my brain kind of goes blank when I think further. Like I'm already so spatially challenged when I think like I don't have that spatial piece in my brain that's turned on, and I'm like, which way's north, which way's left, which way's right, which is just terrible. And so this one, I wasn't even looking at the map. Every time my eyes just kind of glazed over when I was like, I was like, wait, they're not all they're not all on the
there's
same
other
continent?
lands. Yeah, there's other continents. I know. I literally was just like, KK. This is another thing that I'm annoyed about is like, which I'll talk about this again in like our gripes and grumbles, but the magic in this book. For example, Feyre here can talk to Rhys through a mating bond because that's how mating bonds work. But because that would make it so low stakes, because Feyre and Rhys would know if each other were hurt or scared or whatever, they make it, or she makes it, that if you use it too much, another person can like scent it on you and stuff like that. And again, correct me, like we're not those girlies, I won't name names, but there are girlies out there that are like, they know all this lore and they read the books in a way that they have it all, and that's just like, that's not the way I read. I'm here for the vibes, not the facts. But like, what the fuck?
Glad that you wrote that, because this is actually the part that I could, because there's the only kind of fun romance that we get at the beginning is a little bit of interactions between Feyre and Rhysand. But yeah, I guess the stakes are such that if they could just communicate, then it's really not that big of a deal. But it's like, I can't do this. And I think I just wrote down, like, I was like, what is the lore building here? Because it doesn't really match up with, like, is it, I think it's just because he gave her parts of his Daemati power that she actually can talk back and forth, because it's like Lucian and Elaine are mates, but they can't talk otherwise, because Lucian's like,
but can't they? He can tug her.
He can like send a little zap or something. Yeah. Make it make sense. I don't care. It's just like, okay.
They don't talk to each other, because otherwise he would have been talking to her.
Yeah, they don't talk. So I don't think it's the mate specific. The eye roll. But yeah, she's just like, even if, I got to minimize to use it. And then Lucian, I think, is so worried about Elaine and so obsessed with her because he laid eyes on her and she is now his mate, that he suspects that Feyre is like a little evil, like a little bit something's going on. But he's just like, I don't care, because I want to know. I want to like make sure that Elaine's okay.
She is his way back to Elaine. So even though he's still sus of her, and they're both sus of each other, they need to work with each other because she has access to Elaine in Velaris. So they go on like 3 different trips to look at the hole in the wall, this like ragtag group, and Tamlin isn't there. So he does send Feyre, even though they like almost get in the same argument that they have in book 1. And on their 3rd trip, like they all kind of go without incident, but on their 3rd trip, she's planning to leave back to the Night Court. So she like packs a bag. But they are also planning to like strike, I guess, the princess and prince.
Who are fucking, by the way.
Like, who are totally fucking.
They're cousins or brothers or sisters or something, and Feyre's like, he would. Well,
they're brother and sister, because
they're twins.
Their cousin. I don't know, but their cousin. Like, who cares? Like, literally, who cares? But they're fucking
related. Yeah.
And like, why does she keep bringing that up? That was so unnecessary. I guess, so like, we don't feel bad that there's like collateral damage, but it's like, that's the King of Hybern's family, like relations. We wouldn't give a fuck if they died anyways.
That part was weird. That part was funny. But yeah, okay, there's a fight. They're like, Feyre has to escape. She has to like undo her ruse. And so there's like a fight, and also the Hybern people stuck. Like they like kill a bunch of humans that come over the wall, and it's like causing all this issue. And it's like, this is why they're evil, and this is why we don't want the wall taken down, so that like Hybern can have human slaves again and do all this stuff. And so yeah, there's a fight. There's like a pretty badass like. She like gets them good. Feyre is just like,
she kills them and like leaves like them in halves or whatever in the forest, and she has to do it all by like brute force because they poisoned her with Faebane, so she doesn't have access to her magic. Just wait, the one last thing is the ragtag team is the prince and princess, Feyre, Lucian, and Jurian. Because Jurian's there as well, working for the king. There's this one scene that I want to mention before we move on, is when they're at camp one night, Jurian is talking to Feyre, and he's like, I still don't know if like what's up with you. Like, he can see past this act that she is putting on for Tamlin and Lucian.
Yeah, because he was like, I knew Rhysand in the war like 500 years ago, and I know that he's not a bad guy.
He's not a dick. He's not the person that he says he is, and I don't think you're the person that you say you are. So that is very interesting.
At one point, one of the princess, and this is important to me as I like think about other characters, the Princess Branna or whoever, they're having dinner, and before she's dead, and whenever they're at Spring Court, and she says that autumn court males have fire in their blood and they fuck like it too. Let's like put a little note in that. Like, okay, I'm already hot for Lucian.
I know.
I am. And so I'm like, all right, I'll keep that in mind. Thank you.
Yeah, which I get. And that might be related to his paternity, which we find out, I feel like, later on in the book. So Lucian comes back to this scene and decides to leave with Feyre, which is a risky move because he's turning his back on Tamlin, but he really wants to find his mate. So they go through a secret tunnel that takes them through Autumn Court, and they run into Eris and Lucian's other brothers, which we know don't speak anymore because of the More Eris thing and Tamlin and Lucian killing two of them. And so they fight and they're able to escape. And Feyre is able again to, I guess the Feybane is like wearing off, but she's able to use fire, which was one of the powers that the Autumn Court King, Lord Baron, gave to her. And the High Lords don't know which powers she ended up getting from them. And so as like a war tactic, they're trying to keep her powers unknown, but this like reveals that she has this ability from Lord Baron. And they make it to Wintercourt, which is cool that we're going through all the courts because I can just picture all of like that. This is like a snowy fight. It reminded me of a lot of the Volturi like Breaking Dawn.
Yeah, I just want to be, it just like tickles me. Like I know we've joked about, it's just like, okay, that seems rudimentary. Summer court, day court, night court. And I'm like, no, I'm living for this. Yeah, give me something simple. They're like, it's autumn court. And I'm like, I can see the fall leaves. And they're like, they're like this continent over here where the hybrid is. I'm like, what? I don't understand. What season is it?
No, literally. And it's so fucking funny how we're like, this is really basic. And then we're like, well, the rest of the story is so fucking complicated that I can't even keep up. But I'm still talking shit. And I can't have it both ways. I'm talking shit about both options.
Here for the vibes. I'm here for the winter vibes. They have an epic battle on the icy lake, frozen over. It's like, are they going to get the brothers find them again? But it's like Feyre's powers were just getting back enough that she could send a message away to so that like the night court knows where she is. And then
Cassian and Asriel
arrive and basically save the day, although Feyre has like some badass moments. And then they like escape back with Lucian to the night court. And they're back
and she reunites with Rhysand. I really like this scene. So of course, because it's like the found family, we check in with all the characters.
They reunite, but it's actually quite sweet because I think they just want to rip each other's clothes off. But Feyre's also
everyone's there, so
everyone's
like,
there.
Yeah,
he's like, get the fuck my house, like I can fuck her. And then he's like, that's what it pays to be like a high lord. I can do whatever I want, which is kind of funny. But yeah, I think there's a moment where they're like in their bedroom or something, and even I was thinking, like, aren't you worried about your sisters or whatever? Like, you haven't seen them since they turned into Fae. And he's like, do you want me to bring you to them? Like, they're okay. There's some stuff going on. Like, we can do that. And she's like, no, I want to fuck you too.
Yeah. She's like, yeah, in an hour. Like, yeah, it's so funny. So I like this scene because she's like all gross from battle. So he like draws her a bath with his magic, and then, but they like don't have sex right away. Like she like has a bath, she like brushes out her hair and stuff like that. And it's a really fun scene. This is the stuff that I like to see happen. Also, I just want to say it's so funny because I was obsessed with Outlander for years. And it's so funny now that I'm just realizing it, but I stopped watching the TV show because exactly for this same reason, where it's like the couple's together and like it's solid by like I would say season 3 or season 4. So I'm like, I don't need to watch 5, 6, and 7.
No, I think that's why we might be like people who like enemies to lovers. Like for me, it's all the tension build up a lot of the time. And I think a writer has to be really talented to like make you still invested in the characters. And I'm like still invested in them, but I'm not page turning excited. But this was fun because it was pretty sexy, and they were doing a teasing thing. Although, man, he is obsessed with licking her. Like, I know he's got a foot fetish. He wants to lick off 7 days worth of like filth and blood. He's like, if you don't do this, like I'll lick every inch of you. And she's like, dude, okay, I'll have a bath. Anyways, that part, but it's it's kind of
Like, it's
taboo,
not
so it's
just
also
sweat.
sex.
It's like, I know. But it's like, that's not just sweat. That's like, they literally were like in a cave for like 4 days.
Oh,
like,
and there's blood all over her anyways.
blood.
But he says, I missed you. Talk about peak romance. I missed you every second, every breath. Not just this, he said, shifting his hips for emphasis and dragging a groan from deep in my throat, but talking to you, laughing with you. I missed having you in my bed but missed having you as my friend even more. Okay, cuties.
It's very cute. It's very, very cute. And we see that because their whole relationship was built on this friendship that they cultivated over months as she was healing.
What did you think about? I wrote this down specifically because I think of somewhere around this, Lucian looks at Reese and Fair was like, yes, the painting, I'll name it. The clever fox stares down, wings down.
The amount of times that she fucking references a painting, which in reality I do like it's cool that artists see the world like that, like where they can just picture a painting in their head. But we know she's a bad painter. I stand by that theory. And it's like she names them like the lamest things I've ever heard. Like, it just, I don't know. I'm so tired of this chick. like,
There's also like I think this is the very first part when he's filling her in on everything, that he also kind of said something about, or Feyre senses tension from Cassian regarding Nesta when they like bring up Nesta. And this is like the kind of first part. And then they go back to the House of Wind to see everybody, right? And I think then we see an interaction between, I don't know, Nesta's like reading a romance novel, which is really funny and self-insert. She like, well, I'm like, yeah, of course there's all these romance novels that she loves. And somebody, I think, does Cassian say like, I wouldn't have pegged you for a romance reader. And they're just, I don't know, there's just like a lot of back and forth. And somebody says to him like, why do you bother Cassian? Because he's like trying to train Nesta, and we find out that he's trying to like get her involved in doing stuff, but she just kind of refuses and just wants to stay with Elaine. Because they're really, it's been a lot for them since they've just been turned fae. And someone says, why do you bother Cassian? And he's like, because I can't stay away.
Yeah.
Something's brewing.
Something's brewing, and it's very much like Twilight, where it's like when you're a human, if you had like an intense, or at least this is how I read it, if you had an intense like personality trait, it can be heightened when you become a vampire / a fae. And so we see basically that happening where like Elaine is like like non-communicative, and Nesta's bitter and angry, and like Feyre always described her as like kind of a bitch, but like kind of like a jaguar, like, or like just something like that's like lurking and walking through like the forest looking for their prey or whatever. I know because I'm like a little bit spoiled that like she becomes a redeeming character or whatever, but like,
but you hate her.
Yeah,
I think you're supposed to.
I know.
I think it's like on it's funny. I know I could talk about Nesta for a lot of time, and but I think on the rereads now that I had context for like Nesta's book and some further stuff, like you do kind of like sympathize or empathize with her a little bit more. But I just love like because Feyre and Rhysand are like all lovey-dovey, all of my tension is coming from Cassie and Nesta, like all of my interest. Because I think he has to fly her. He's like training her something that he has to fly her up to the house because they can't, because there's only 10,000 steps or something that get up to the house. Otherwise they have to be flown in.
Yeah, because they can't winnow because of the guards.
Cassian's like, oh, are you scared, like, to fly? And she goes, why would I be scared of an oversized bat who likes to throw temper tantrums? And he goes, seems like you're a little on edge, Nesta, and you left so abruptly last night. Anyway, I can help ease that tension. And he calls her Ness, and she's like, don't call me that.
Yeah.
And then there's this one line too where he like drops her off and he says, you're welcome, like as she's like walking away because she like doesn't look at him. And it says, called after her more than a bite to his voice. His hands clenched and slackened at his sides as if he were trying to loosen the feel of her from his palms. And I'm like, that like gif of Mr. Darcy in Pride and Prejudice where he's like trying, I'm like, I see you here, Maas, I see you.
No, that's so fucking true. I know they are really giving what we need in these books, but because it's Feyre's POV and that one chapter Rhysand's POV, like we just don't get to see or like hear as much as I need to keep this interesting.
Hold on, a little fun quotes. I mean, isn't that, I'm like, oh, something spicy is going on here.
Something's happening. Also, Feyre notes that Nesta appears to be more like Amryn than like High Fae, so that we see come into play later on in the book. But everyone else is healed. Amryn's doing research, but like Cassian and Azriel are healed from the Highburn incident. And again, Elaine's not talking or eating, but Feyre's hoping to mend that over the next couple weeks. So they're like, okay, we gotta put off this war, so we're going to call a meeting with the High Lords of Prythian in 2 weeks, and we can all come together and hopefully unite to fight Highburn as one big group. Nesta has been, again, putting off doing anything with this group until Feyre arrived, but she witnesses a conversation as they're trying to figure out what to do next, and is like, okay, I'll come to Hewn City. I'll practice my powers with Amryn, but she doesn't agree to like anything else with like Cassian or anything. And Lucien at this point is not seeing Elaine because they don't want to like spring her mate on her, but he is kind of like tentatively trying to like talk to her and see her. He's starting to have more thoughts about like, okay, Tamlin was like overly formal, overly hierarchical, and I could see why you like this here.
Welcome to the 21st century, baby. I do feel like it's this like lift of thing. And because I love Lucien and like I like seeing that for him, I still think that like I have my tin hat on, that there was like something between Lucien. I think it makes it so much more interesting to think that there was like some type of romance or something between Lucien and Tamlin. I know that that's not canon, but when you read it also with that layer that like they were, or whatever, if you want to say that, you know, they were like war brothers for like 500 years and he like left his family and that was his found family. And then he like got that ripped out from under him because Tamlin's like emotionally abusive and has all this like really strict hierarchy and all this weird stuff in the Spring Court that we're like meant to be like, don't know if we feel great about that.
It's kind of annoying that more people aren't sympathetic, I feel like, in the book and then like just readers, because it's very much what happened to Feyre. It's like she kind of globbed on to the first person that showed her kindness, which was Tamlin and Lucien, after Lucien had like a horrible childhood and like teenage, like young adult years or whatever you would call a phase, like stages of life with his own family. So it's like it makes total sense that he would feel indebted to Tamlin, and he doesn't know anything else. So seeing Valaris and how this group works is huge for him.
And maybe it's because we don't know enough about Elaine, where I'm like not as invested in her, and I'm like, okay, this this quiet random gardener girl who does nothing and is like super depressed.
But she's like always like crying and stuff. And I would be her too. 100%. Like I don't want to say that, but it's like, yeah, okay, she's cool. She gardens and she is not like unable to have courage or anything. Like
yeah, we would just be also wasting away in the library. Like
totally.
or the husband. My question for you is like, I don't know, does the mating thing do anything for you with them? Like I'm just like, okay, like this seems weird. Get over it, Lucien. Lucien, she's not into you. She's like sad because she can't be with her like betrothed human man. I just was like, I'm like, it's obviously
it is interesting, and obviously it's like Grayson is like a shit person until like the end and stuff like that. So it's like, why I don't want her to be with him or anything like that. I think the thing with the mating bond in this series versus other mating series or series that have mating bonds is like, usually you have to like the person. Like usually you like the person or you're enemies to lovers but then become lovers, where it's like they do talk about some of the mating lore in this book, and basically Rhys explains to Feyre that like it's kind of a gamble and it's not always matched well. Like there can be poor matches and they're lucky that it worked out well for them, but basically like whatever makes the matches, I guess the cauldron or whatever, can choose wrong. They're just, it's trying for the best chances of survival, which is just different because that isn't usually like, and it depicts mating bonds with other couples, like maybe his parents or whatever, that it's like they just had like a companionable relationship.
It's actually interesting. Like I'm actually like I want more lore about it because I think it could be interesting. I want to know more about what happens when things are rejected. And again, we reference when is the mating bond rejected and what does it do to people, but I want to know about what happens with the characters that we care about and like what that will happen between Lucian and Elaine. But that mating lore that you talked about where they're not necessarily like a good match for each other answers your question from
episode 1. Yes, because I asked you that. I said, or episode 2, or yeah,
you were like, does the romance feel less real because they're fated, they were always going to be together? And then it was so funny, I had this light bulb moment because I was like, I don't know what I'm talking about. And then I wrote down, it's like, clearly Feyre and Rhys do have something special, which proves the point that there is really good romance between them, because just because that there's a mating bond doesn't mean that they're going to work. And so
yes, 100%.
We love Payson.
So 100%. And yeah, when we discussed book 2, we talked about like the concept of mates and soulmates and stuff like that is obviously interesting. I feel like a lot of people, especially in romance novels, are like searching for that and stuff like that. And I think my question was always like, well, if the fates are pulling you together, do you have choice in it? And basically Rhys is saying that you do. I think in terms of like Elaine, like that's one of my biggest wonder whys of this book is like, yeah, what's going on with Elaine, Asriel, and Lucian, because we see almost more tender moments with Asriel than we do with Lucian. So I'm wondering if Sarah J. Maas, is planting these seeds of lore so eventually she'll break the bond with Lucian
hope so. I hope that
be with Asriel.
I hope there's seeds being, I don't know, I won't say I hope that she's gonna be with Asriel because we'll talk about that, but I hope that there's more like these seeds are being planted so that there's kind of like an interesting reveal that if you're somebody who pays attention to these little details in the book, it's like, oh, that's so interesting, or like I love that because I clocked that back in like book 2, book 3. Speaking of Asriel though, so just right around this time when they're all like talking about the war, figuring out what their strategy is going to be, Feyre wants to learn how to fly with her wings that she can manifest, and they're like, that's really hard, you like learn that as a kid. But Asriel, which we like know nothing really about him, and he's always quiet, he's like, I'll train you. I learned how to fly when I was actually a little bit older than just like kind of knowing, because I was like locked in a fucking dungeon in my dad's house and didn't learn how to fly and couldn't fly until I was a bit older. And Rhys, there's a moment where Feyre is like at the House of Wind and Cassian and Nesta are bickering, and Feyre is like, please, dear God, save me. Like she's sending a little message down the mating bond.
Yeah.
And Rhys is like, all right. Like I'm sending Asriel to help you. Like I can't come, but I'll send Asriel. And he goes, I sent another pretty face for you to admire. Not as beautiful as mine, of course, but a close second. And I was like, LOL. Everyone loves Asriel, and I'm like, this just proves my tin hat.
So also, I just want to say that I would be pissed if she ended up having Cassian and, like, again, I haven't read on, so this is just a guess, but I'm assuming Cassian and Nessa end up together. And then if Asriel ends up with Elaine and then she ends up with Rhys, like, the
Torry.
group with, like, I will fucking end it all.
This is already on my Grapes and Grumbles to talk about a little bit.
I will end it all.
We are going to have to do some good internet deep dive, because once you read the 4th one, there are like, because so much time has passed and the 5th or 6th book or whatever isn't out, people are up in arms about who Asriel is going to end up with. Like there are like fandom wars, and so we'll have to do a bit of a deep dive of like our character guesses.
Should do, I was thinking if we do finish this series of what it is, like the 6 books or whatever, is it 6 books? 5 and a half or whatever,
four and a novella,
4 and a half. We should do like a
predictions,
like a lore episode or something. But it's annoying. And like I saw that Sarah J. Maas posted about spring, like the first day of spring. So like I know she's like heating up to maybe announce something, but Especially, I feel like she would want to continue the series if ACOTAR is like still getting that TV show.
As I'm so like petty about this book and like giving it shit, like I need the next book. Like I need
Oh,
air
totally.
and oxygen.
No, totally. I still want to say I'm obsessed with this series. I actually cannot wait to start the next book now that I'm done with this one, because it's like, it doesn't need to be 700 pages. It doesn't need to be this complicated. And I don't know.
Here for the vibes.
I know. Here for the vibes. And
the vibes are that, and anyways,
the vibes are bad. The vibes are rancid.
The vibes are rancid, but there's a little bit of cute flirting. Like I feel like, I don't know what else you want to mention about this part of the plot, but I think there's a big part where like Rhysand shows Feyre the library under the mountain where like all the priestesses can come who have been through like traumatic events, and they're doing some research on the wall to see if they can save it without Hybern tearing it down. And there's like some flirting. Rhysand's like, let's see what names you call me when my head is between your legs, Feyre darling. And they do a little bit of teasing, so there's like some fun stuff there.
I love when he calls her Feyre darling.
I know,
it makes me sick. It makes me absolutely sick to my stomach.
It's so good. I just want a fairy man to call me like Megan darling all the time.
It's so fucking cute. But yeah, okay, I liked this scene, but then I was also thinking way too hard about this, but it's like priestesses and like fairies that have been like essayed and stuff like that. So I'm like, can you not like almost have public sex in the library? Like, can you just wait like fucking an hour or whatever? But
would be on par with their inappropriate timed sexual encounters.
100%. But yeah, I like it when he like flies to another level and then like puts his wings up so she can't see him. So it's very, very cute. And they decide at the library that they're going to recruit the bone carver. So Feyre and Cassian go and speak to the bone carver, and they agree that they'll help them in the war if they bring him the Ouroboros mirror. But no one, like, there's lore about the mirror that no one can take it, because if you look inside it, you either go insane or you die, which is like, okay, fucking Harry Potter. Harry Potter with whatever the mirror is with.
Mirror of a Rise.
Yeah. This was really interesting, though. I thought this was a fun romance bit, because the carver, which we know takes on different forms, was the form of Feyre and Rhys's future son. So I really like that. And then she, at another point, like, shows him down through their bond what he looked like. And I was like, this is very, very cute.
Yeah, that part's fine. I feel like the Ouroboros, I'm like sure, like bone carver, like okay, yeah, you need to like recruit all of these. You're starting to think about all these like extra big monsters or gods or fae or whatever that might help you in your side of the war, because you're really worried that it's not. We also get Elaine and Nesta move into the townhouse around this time because they're really worried about Elaine. She's like not eating, she's not drinking, she's wasting away essentially. Nesta's actually really worried about her, which is the only bonding that like Nesta and Feyre are having, because they're both worried about her. They even let like Lucian talk to her because they want to see if that'll spark something, and then they decide, you know what, you're moving down to the townhouse. The like House of Wind isn't good. Like be around civilization and humans actually in Valaris. And Azriel is so, you referenced this earlier about Azriel kind of having moments with Elaine, and he's like so described. He's like the tallest of them all, I think. And like they joke about his wingspan being the widest, which means he's got the biggest peen. Like good for you, Azriel. And he's so gentle and nice with Elaine and shows her the garden. He's like, why don't I show you the garden? And she calls him beautiful. And he blushes, like she just looks up to him and kind of is like starry-eyed, and it's just like, oh, you're beautiful. So that's like planting some types of seeds there, I feel like. And I'm like fine about it. Again, I kind of am like bored with Elaine, so I don't really care.
Same. Like I don't care if you live or die.
Like I want something like spicier for Azriel than that.
You're getting into my Graves and Grumbles, but yeah, me too. After 500 years of pining over this person who's never going to love you back, I feel like he deserves like this kick-ass chick, and this bitch just isn't giving anything. But I will hold on hope that, again, with Nesta and Elaine, that we'll get to see more of their personalities. But I just remember in fucking ACOTAR, them doing nothing and being like the dumbest bitches, and Feyre having to like keep them alive for like years. And I just like, I won't get over that. And they're also just so rude to Feyre because it's like, she has done nothing to harm them or like do anything unfavorable to them. They also like didn't, she's not at fault for the cauldron thing.
I think that
Like,
there's a lot of interesting stuff here, and like fandom has a lot of different opinions about this too, about the sisters. And part of it is like, it's funny, like trauma stuff, but grounding in that, like a lot of the hatred or like the tension does seem to go on Feyre, but they all experienced trauma of like their mom dying and then their
yeah,
dad not
yep.
really being there for them. And so
Yeah.
was it actually on Nesta and Elaine to like everybody gets really shits on Nessa and everybody them for not hunting and not helping out, but it wasn't on them. It was on them to not be like shitty and try to steal the money that Favor got for like fucking little purses and dresses and stuff. But anyways, lots of stuff to talk about with the sisters, but we don't get as much of that yet.
Yeah, and you're right. They totally experience trauma, or like even just their sister being ripped away from them and not knowing what's happening. Like all of that traumatic, but like why do they seem to like take it out on Feyre? I understand why they take it out on Faye because they've been taught for years that Faye are bad, but like it's just, and everyone deals with trauma differently, but like I just, at this point I'm like annoyed with them. I like was totally okay if they just never showed up in the books again, but
I feeling that way. I remember feeling that way, and
yeah.
it wasn't until I read the fourth book that I like actually had a bit of a change. So we'll have to
Yeah,
check back in about that.
totally, because like Sarah J. Maas says that she actually relates to Nesta the most, so I'm sure there is going to be some redeeming qualities. I just haven't seen them.
I love it. I love it. I love it.
Elaine is like talking in riddles. That's another thing, but they don't really know that they are anything of note. They just kind of think that she's gone a little cray-cray here. But the group starts putting their plans in place, so they have to go to Hewn City to talk to Moore's dad about getting his armies to help them. And he doesn't want to. He's trying to bargain with them that they get access to, the people of Hewn City get access to Valaris. And Rhysand knew that this was going to happen, so he invites Eris from the Autumn Court to come, which really upsets Moore. And Eris is like, if you like support my wishes to take over the throne in Autumn Court, I will like help you with whatever you need. I'll talk to my dad and stuff like that. They also talk about the Bone Carver plan, and Amren explains the Bone Carver needs to be bound to a body to be able to escape the prison because that's what she did. So Nesta and Feyre decide to do more research in the library, and they get attacked by two of Hybern's ravens, and they realize that Elaine's like mumblings were actually her telling the future, and that she's a seer, which is a person that can like find things and see in the future, but it's not described as like plain language. So when they are attacked, they retreat down the library to this pit where something evil lives, and they don't know what it is. Rhysand was like, it's always been there. It doesn't bother me, so I don't bother it. And Feyre makes a bargain with the monster and says, I'll bring you company if you save us and kill these ravens. And it agrees. And that happens, but not before Cassian like swoops in and like collects Nesta and then like helps Feyre out of this circumstance.
And I'll have to send you some funny memes that you can post too of Cassian being so afraid of, I think the name is Bryaxis.
Bryaxis, yeah.
This like creature at the bottom of the library that they never know, and that like Cassian's the one who's like seen it and is just like terrified of it, and it is scary when you're reading it. And then there's all these memes about Cassian being so scared and being like such a baby when it comes to Bryaxis, and it really like is. It's really funny. But yeah, I feel like this is like now there's another creature, like a god or something going on that they can maybe recruit. Like they helped them the one time to get rid of those ravens, and yeah, what can they do there?
Yeah, and as this is happening, they're like prepping for war, but there's an attack on Summer Court, and the inner circle goes to help fight it. And there's a point where Reese is tracked down by the King of Highburn, and he's like fighting with him, and he realizes it's just an illusion. So we get this like first kind of look of what fighting the king will be like, and just basically I feel like the moral of this story is like it's gonna be hard. They don't have enough troops. They don't have like the like I don't know, the trickery. They don't have the magic that
No, it's
the
gonna
king
be
has.
what we found out about from this fight is it's gonna be boring. It's gonna be boring. That's what we find out. I like am like, okay, yeah, any of the battle scenes, it's just very fantasy. It's fantasy. It's not it's fine.
Fantasy, and I don't want to shit on that genre, but like, man, oh man, it again very similar. Like, I'm having Outlander vibes, where it's like, it's even hard. I feel like to depict it in an interesting way on TV. I don't know. It's just something that I'm not interested in at all.
I think the thing that we find out here, like, yeah, like you said, they obviously need to get this meeting with the High Lords together because there's no way that they're going to defeat Hybern by themselves. And also, we kind of find out that the king actually wants Nesta because she like she took something
from the cauldron,
which is badass when she like points her finger out at him, and it's like kind of this like death knell or death wish, and everyone's kind of like, why is she kind of like Amryn? She's got this like
and Cassian says at one point, he's like, that's a moment I'll never forget.
He's hot for Nesta, let's be real. So they're like, okay, now we kind of know a little bit, we kind of know what Hybern's doing, we know a little bit more. I mean, they like win, I guess technically. Yeah, they hold the Summer Court. They're like trying to repair stuff with Tarquin since he gave them blood rubies, and he's like pissed at them for stealing from them. And then post battle,
there are two times they have sex in the tent where Reese, like, I get it, Reese puts up a sound barrier, so like they're not disturbing anyone except for me. I'm currently being disturbed. Like
the line, his growls of pleasure filled the tent, drowning out the distant cries of the injured and dying.
Like, what?
People hate this in the fandom. It's like funny. I'm like, whatever. You're just like passionate after sex. You're like, what? I'm like so excited about life because I've seen all of this death, and like I love you and we're still safe and we're together. I get it. And mind your business. Does the sound barrier not work both ways?
Like that's the part that I don't get. Like, okay, I get it. Also, like, sex is, yes, a way to connect with your partner if you're feeling unconnected. It is a way to distract yourself sometimes, or like disassociate from like what's going on. It is, maybe you're feeling so shitty that you're like, this is one thing I can do to make myself feel better. Like, there are so many different ways or reasons why people have sex. And also, I just said, this book is way too much war and way too little sex. But this is not what I wanted. This is not what I wanted. This is insane to me. And also, it's just like, it's not like the scenes were like chapter 55 in Akamath, where it's like, it's so detailed and it's like pages of like, just like juicy tidbits. It's always just like a kind of like a half page, like quick bang that I'm just like not interested in. I don't know. I
don't think there's enough romance scenes between Feyre and Rhysand in this. And again, there's maybe like no tension. The best that I get, which we glossed over a little bit, but when like Mor is really upset at Rhysand for his like trick, I've got Eris helping, and there's a bit of like family dynamics and conflict that happens. And also Rhysand says something about Nesta that pisses Feyre off, and she's like, don't talk about my sister like that, and they kind of have a tiff, and they make it up. But that's interesting because it's kind of getting into a dynamics of not a picture perfect relationship. But yeah, otherwise there's just kind of like these like little tiny throwaways, and then they're fucking and they have sex or whatever, and I'm like, I needed some other romance to get me through this book. And then they're like, obviously she's planting some seeds with Cassian and Nesta and stuff. So anyways, they fuck after this battle, they're fine, and there's like a bit of a moment between Cassie and Nesta where she's like, so you're alive, and he's like, were you hoping otherwise? And she was like, you didn't come, like she was nervous because he didn't come back and show her that he was alive. So there's like these hints that she does care. And then there's this really funny line. I think they go back to the bone carver just to be like, I don't care about this mirror. We can't get it. You just have to help us. And like he still says no. But they come when they're right after the battle, and the carver's like, oh, I most prefer you bloodied up to Reese, and like sighs kind of romantically, like looking at Reese, and I'm like, same Carvey.
Yeah,
Same
yeah.
bone Carvey. I also am picturing my battle worn
Yeah, everyone
fat
just
boy.
can't get enough of recent.
I'm like, sorry, I guess I am a recent simp. Anyways, and
Yeah, me
then
too.
we're like at the High Lord meeting, right? Now?
Yeah, and I would say this is the best scene in the book. Like, it's the most intriguing. We finally, like, again, after talking about these courts for 3 books, we finally get to meet all of them and see their dynamics play out. And of course, like, there's a lot at stake because we need all of them to say yes. But the most interesting part is that Feyre is going to see Tamlin for the first time since she left for the second time. And it's the first time that they're going to see each other together outside of when they had the cauldron kerfuffle at the end of Akamath. And it goes about as like poorly as you think it would. Tamlin is a dick right off the bat. And he is so, like, it's so petty and rude. Like, he just can't get over this. I thought that, like, him knowing that they're mates, which I don't even know if he knows at this point because he doesn't listen to anybody, but it's like, wouldn't that give you some type of solace that they're mates and you couldn't have really done anything about it? But I guess that's not really how it works. But he says like the rudest thing to Feyre ever. He says, well, he says it to Rhysand, but it's obviously about Feyre. He says, when you fuck her, have you noticed that little noise she makes right before she climaxes? And it's like, you would never say that. Like, you would never.
Such a little fuck boy. Like, get over yourself.
It's so fuck boy, but it's like, also, it's like, I always have such a gripe with romance novels about sometimes the way that they talk about sex in front of other people, because it's like, you would just never do this. Like, you would never talk about, like, sex.
I love that your line is that you would never talk about this. It's like nothing would ever happen in a fantasy.
I know. But like, it's so annoying when books are like, even when like, I get it, like maybe there's like some jokes like after a party or something, like, oh, like, saw you two disappeared last night. Like, maybe you would joke about that like with your friends or whatever, but the amount that people talk about sex or the way that they talk about it in books is just like, it's not realistic. And like, it's, I don't know. It's just, it's a low blow.
The cries of the injured and dying, you're right. We wouldn't be talking about that. Most importantly,
yeah,
I think in response to this line, we get the line from Asriel.
Yeah.
Hold on.
Yeah. Your best Asriel.
But it was Asriel who said, his voice cold like death, be careful how you speak about my high lady.
Which is when I think he finds out that she's a high lady. And he was like, oh, that's why you were asking me about it before. Like,
you really wanted like a lot of power, so you left me for him. I think that like Tamlin is like laying it on a little, like, I think that this writing is laying it laying it out a little thick. Again, sometimes I still have whiplash about the pieces that we saw about Tamlin that we liked in the first book, and that he's not just like, oh, revealed, he's the evil one. Like, I just would wish for a bit of nuance. Like, as I'm saying, like, this book was too long, and I'm like, no, but give me a bunch of like Tamlin chapters. Like, I want to know some of the more interesting stuff going on. Yeah, I don't know. I just like, we're supposed to hate him as we leave this, and it worked. Like, I'm like, you're so annoying. You're such a little fuckboy. And yeah, I said I'm so embarrassed about Tamlin's little fit. He is not handling this breakup well. Slut shaming and trying to wreck the war. Like, get over yourself, bruh.
100%. Yeah, it's so fucking embarrassing. Like, the most embarrassing thing you can do after a breakup is like grovel for the other person in front of them. Like, it's so despy and like embarrassing. But they are staying overnight in day court because they didn't solve the problem about why they were originally there.
Last piece of that stuff, you're right. There's some like detailed stuff, but in the meeting, an important thing, because my little tin hat of like all the gay characters and relationships. I don't know if you know this, but there's a very strong Asriel heiress fandom like
No.
dedication. And so the first seed is planted very early on when they're in Hewn City, and Reese is trying to get when he brings Eris in, and he's trying to get the Darkbringers, or I don't know, whatever they are, the army in the Hewn City from Moore's dad. And he's like, I
Yeah.
had to bring Eris in because he caught Azriel spying in the Autumn Court. Like that's also a part of this, was that he caught
Yeah.
Azriel spying. And we don't really know a little bit more about that, but like fandom, certain fandom, the type of fandom that I'm in,
Yeah, yeah,
loves to
yeah.
grab onto this. And then in that meeting, I can't remember exactly what happens, but there's like a big fight that breaks out where Baron leaves
Hmm.
because like fire is going on him, and Azriel like has his hands around Eris's throat and he's like choking him out. And it says Azriel's eyes slid to Eris, the High Lord's son panting beneath him, and the shadow singer leaned down to whisper something in his ear that made Eris blanch further. There's like a lot of like enemies to lovers like fan fiction for them. And I said it's just like really he's defending more because as
Yes,
Eris
yes,
said
yes,
something, some shit,
yes.
and then we're like, yeah, Azriel's been in love with Moore for 500 years. And I'm like, it's sexy that Azriel is so strong and like enraptured in his defense of Moore that like Farah comes up and is like speaking to Azriel like almost like an injured or like dangerous animal, because she's like, as I put a tattooed hand on the hard, near invisible curve of the shield, because Azriel's like not letting anyone near them. He's like gonna kill Eris. And she's like, come, Azriel. Azriel stopped. As Azriel turned his face towards me, the frozen rage there rooted me to the spot, but beneath it I could almost see the images that haunted him. The hand Moore had yanked away, her weeping, distraught face as she screamed at Reese. I offered my hand to Azriel, come sit beside me. And he kind of like gets up and he like listens to his high lady. I'm just like really here for all of this Azriel stuff. That's all I had to say about that.
Yeah, me too. I would much prefer Azrael with fucking Eris than Elaine, to be honest. The Elaine story, that would just be so cheesy and simple writing for the three Archeron sisters to end up with the three bad boys. But anyways, we get like my second favorite scene in the next chapter where they have to stay overnight. Yeah, because they didn't come to an agreement. They had this argument. They decide they'll all take Faebane so they won't be able to use their magic and like hurt each other or like argue any further. But they have to stay overnight because they're going to meet again the next day. And we find out a lot about this Hellion character who had an affair with Lucian's mother, who also fucks more. Like that, like it's so crazy because I guess if you're Fae, someone that's fucking your mom or like has fucked your mom is also can fuck your friend. Like,
You all look like you're 30 years old or 25 or whatever. Go for it.
yeah, 100%. And we get this scene, which like I feel like we didn't even really explain who Hellion is. He's the day court High Lord. They are all like in their suite or whatever, and Moore and Hellion go off and have sex. They're kind of explaining the dynamics about how Hellion likes to sleep with everybody and stuff like this. Which, like, you have to watch the power dynamics being the High Lord of Day Court with your minions or whatever. But Feyre's like, oh, yeah, I totally get that. Like, if I looked like that, like, I would also be fucking everybody. And then he goes, would you like someone to join us in bed, Feyre, darling? But he's asking her through his bond. And we find out Hellion, he wants to fuck everyone, but especially Azriel, Cassian, and Moore.
Yes,
which is so funny.
Right? I'm like, my polydream's coming too. He's like coming on to Cassian, Moore, and Azriel. And yeah, Reason says Hellion favors both males and females, usually together in his bed, and has been hounding after that trio for centuries. And like, this made me laugh out loud. Feyre's like, why the hell haven't they said yes? Like,
yeah.
that's
yeah.
so funny. And I'm like, yes, this is spicy. Oh my gosh, I was like, interested.
I want more of this. More of this, please.
Would you like someone to join us in bed, Feyre, darling? And she's just like, you're incorrigible. I think, and he goes, I think you'd like two males worshiping you. And then, funny enough, you said we find out that Hellion was fucking, and had an affair with Lucian's mom, and Feyre clocks and is like, oh, Lucian is Helion's son. But I'm stealing this from someone. I've seen this in a TikTok, so please, this is not my original thought. But somebody was like, how funny. Like, no one has clocked this it takes
I
Feyre
know.
2 seconds
I
as
know. I
fucking if,
know.
and it takes Feyre 2 seconds to be like, wait a minute,
I
come
know.
on.
I know. 100%. It's so annoying cuz then that's huge because then Lucian would be the heir to Daycourt, the rightful heir to Daycourt, and not he was like brother 7 in Autumn Court. So yeah, wild times.
And then Feyre and Rhys talk a little bit about like relationship dynamics of the whole group, and they talk about
Mm-hmm.
Azriel being in love with Mor, but not thinking that he deserved her.
Mm-hmm.
And they mention that Cassian and Nesta might have a mating bond. Like they say something to that effect, and as they're talking about it, but like kind of skip forward. Like they stay overnight, and then as they're trying to get into other stuff, Nesta is like something bad is happening, and then they find out that the wall has been torn down
The cauldron finally brought the wall down, and
before they could do anything.
so they have to immediately head back to the Illyrian war camps. And they decide to, because war is now imminent, to find some solution to save mortal humans. So they decide that they're going to glamour Elaine, go back to the human lands to Grayson, her ex-fiance, and ask him to shelter humans because he lives on this huge fucking estate that's like locked down by like everything that you could ever hope for. And so they all go, the crew goes. Grayson and his dad are being like total dicks. They're like, we don't want to, why would we help you? We don't like want you here. We're not going to help anybody. And surprise, surprise, Jurian is there. He beats everyone to the punch. He explains he's not the enemy. He's not working with Hybern. He's working on the inside. And he says, I know you don't trust me, but Hybern is going to attack Summer Court tomorrow. And I'm telling you this information so you know that you can A, be prepared, and B, know that I'm on your side. And he warns them that Tamlin, after the Dawn Court meeting, went straight to Hybern with all the information. And it's a really sad scene because we finally see Elaine like realize that she's not going to be with Grayson. But it's just, this is again why I don't like Elaine, because Feyre's like, how did you even meet this guy and stuff like that? And Nesta's like, or they're like explaining that the father had a ball, and then Nesta's like, a funeral was more exciting than the ball. So I'm like, why do you even like this guy? Like,
I love that you said that. This is one of the gripes that I had written down. I'm so fucking annoyed every second that Elaine is lovesick over this guy because we don't get any, and I said I think it's because we don't get any real backstory that I am like bought into why we're just like, again, I feel like I don't want to say it's lazy writing or whatever, but it's like, am I supposed to speed skip to be like, no, Elaine, why don't you just like want to be a fairy and like want to do this? Like have a bit more of a compelling human romance so that we make like, wouldn't that be interesting to know if she like rejects the bond with Lucian and then this human like wants to be with her? Like how might we navigate that? It just could be a bit more interesting, but I'm like, I'm so annoyed every time.
we don't
She's
get
so
any of that.
lovesick.
I know. It's like he gave you an iron engagement ring. That's insane. He sounds like a COVID denier. Like he just like that's the type of delusion that he seems at this point. Where it becomes your whole personality that like COVID doesn't exist. It's like the Fae is they're gonna kill you, and that
you are
seeps into every aspect of their lives.
Right.
I know.
And you can say it louder, like cult vibes, like COVID denier vibes. I'm with you, Grayson, the COVID denier. Anyways, they like whatever. They figure it out. They're gonna take in humans to like help them. Feyre's like gonna magically, single-handedly like save a bunch of the humans in the human land now that the wall's down. And then it's basically the battle, like basically the big battle at the end now. And my notes are battle, LOL. I just wrote the description of the helmets on them. I cannot. Did you clock this?
The way that I just skimmed through that and was like, I'm never thinking about that again.
Why did they have helmets? These Fae warriors, I was like, a helmet from what? Like, they were like so powerful and sexy, and we'll have to, maybe we got to rewind, but I cannot. No helmets for me, please. Not sexy.
Also, it's just so annoying. all the times. I totally understand that they're not invincible, so sometimes things happen. But it's sometimes weird how like sore Feyre is or how she can't even hold up her wings. I'm like, aren't you supposed to be like very powerful? Like there's so many limitations that are like so weird.
They really like I think a big part of it is that they winnowed all the humans out
Yeah,
of
and
those lands,
they
and they talk about what a drain on the power that is, and then I mean
yeah,
it comes back
yeah.
whenever they need it, but yeah, I think there's that big drain on power. And so they do eventually, like, really quick scene where Feyre does get the Ouroboros mirror, and convinces the Carver to come in, and it's just like, that's all you wanted. It's like, yeah, I just wanted to know you were worthy to fight for. You stared into the worst parts of yourself, and she just saw like a creepy little dragon, and she like scaly dragon, and then, this is the worst parts of you.
It's so bad. It's so bad. Feyre's like, I need more info and I need to go to the cereal.
Oh yeah, rest in peace.
So Feyre asks Elaine to use her powers to find the cereal. It's in the middle. They go. It's kind of a trap because, not a trap, but Ianthe and 2 Hybern soldiers find Feyre there. And she runs away from them and traps them in the Weaver's cottage, which we learn out that the Weaver is
The Bone
brother and
Carver's
sister with Bryaxis and the Bone Carver. So it's like this.
Is Bryaxis part of it? I don't even know.
I think
at this
so.
point.
So it's like the 3 like siblings like arrive on the battlefield. But I will say that the Ianthe Weaver scene was, I think, the most interesting part of this. And then when Ianthe and the 2 soldiers find Feyre with the cereal asking for the information, they shoot 2 ash arrows at it and it's dying. So she traps them and then she goes back and she like is with it until it dies, something that like no one would ever do. But she goes back to, I'm like, can't even remember what information she needs from the cereal, but
I think how to shut down the cauldron. Again, it doesn't matter. It's just like, it's just information to like help win the battle. Rest in peace to our king of tea, the cereal, who like really loved to like
literally R.I.P.
stir that cauldron. And she comes back.
Cassian's been hurt. Moira's pissed because Feyre didn't tell her where she was going and didn't tell Rhys, even though she could have just set it down the bond. Which is like so fucking annoying because it's like, she's like, well, I thought you wouldn't let me go. And it's like, when has he ever stopped you from doing anything, you fucking dumb bitch? And then Nesta at this point uses her abilities to find where the cauldron is hidden, which opens a link between it and the people that are made. So Amryn, Nesta, Elaine, and Feyre. And this enables Hybern to be able to take Elaine. And so Feyre dresses up as Ianthe, uses one of, I think, like Azriel's or Cassian's
siphon.
Yeah, she sneaks into Hybern's camp and rescues Elaine, but sees a human there that she just like has to save as well because she's still a guilt over the Claire Better stuff.
Yeah.
And she frees this. Well, this is the part where she rescues Elaine and Azriel comes to help them. And she's like, not going to leave the girl alone. So she's like, Azriel, you leave with Elaine and Briar. I'm going to stay here. And Azriel's like, no. And she's like, that's a order from your high lady. And then she is saved by none other than Tamlin of Springcourt.
The way you said that. Tamlin of Springcourt.
He helps her out.
Yes. He's not that bad.
He's not that
been
bad.
Undercover the whole time.
He's conflicted, just like every other person in this book, like just like Jurian or like anyone else that has had like the same story.
At least there is this interesting piece that he is not just like, because he was in love with Feyre and all this stuff, and then I think Jurian reveals or Tamlin or somebody reveals, it's like, actually you completely turned my entire court against me and opened my gates essentially to Hybern. And even though I was like working with them, I wasn't actually like, I was going to turn on them. I never wanted to really work with them. And so this is kind of him showing that he actually maybe has some merit to that, because I was just like, well, again, why didn't you tell her? Like, you have a serious problem with withholding information. We know that with Feyre. And so I'm just like, at least there's this. So yeah, he helps them like make their final escape, and then he kind of disappears to like not work with Hybern anymore.
And so Feyre heads back to the Illyrian war camps and apologizes to Mor. They're like, we said things that we shouldn't have said. I don't even think I said it. Mor's like, you should have told someone where you went, which is completely fair. And Feyre blows up, is so fucking rude. And she's like, yeah, want to talk about being honest more, even though honesty isn't like her power or whatever. She's like,
truth.
Yeah, truth. Yeah. You want to be truthful more? You haven't made a move on Azriel in 500 years. She literally words it like that. I was like, that is so out of fucking pocket. That is so unnecessary for feedback that honestly, that Mor gave you, that is honestly true.
None of your business, Feyre.
And then it's none of your business. It's not related. And also Mor is like, yeah, you should probably tell your subjects, because you're high lady, and your mate where you went. Because again, we're not going to stop you. Look what happened with Rhysand when he went to Amarantha, like, and didn't tell anybody. It's like, they're not going to stop you. They're just going to help protect you in another way. So it's so fucking rude. And then she's like, actually, it's because I'm gay.
I know. The timing that this book came out, everyone was like, they're getting really popular and you have like no queer representation. So you really need to do something, because it's just...
Is that how this came about? That's sad.
I think there's maybe a little bit of a fandom discussion about that. I can't say for certain, but like, as a queer lady reading the books, it like kind of came off that way to me.
Yeah. I was gonna ask you about that, if it's felt shoed in.
Yeah, she's done a couple things where there hasn't been much about the characters, but then we find out much more about the characters later on in a different book. So I wasn't really like, I was like, that's fine. I mean, I kind of wish if this was a TV series, like I want a more episode. Like I also would like something to like give her a bit more depth, because actually I was like, oh, I'm still way more interested in the dynamic between you, Cassian, and Azriel that's been like fed to me this entire time. And there's been nothing else that has been dropped about potentially her being like liking women. And that just would have made it feel a little bit more authentic to me. Or like maybe it's really great writing when you go, oh my God, I saw that thing in the first book that is actually between Feyre and Rhysand, and that really paid off. Now I reread it and I can see that. And like, maybe correct me if I'm wrong to anybody who's listening and like has a different perspective on this, but there has been nothing from the first or second where I'm like, oh, that's what was coming on with Mor.
Totally. The only thing I can think about is that she was like, I go to Rita's so often because like a lot of queer people or queer fae or whatever like gather there. That's like the
Does she say that though?
Yeah, I think she does.
But like in this book.
Yes, but and then in Akamath, she talking goes, about
but it's like she always goes with Azriel and Cassian too. Yeah, like they're always like nobody knows this about you for 500 years anyway, and you're like telling Feyre now, like okay. But I'm not mad about it. I'm like, okay, I want to know more. Great, this like I guess does explain why you're like not with Azriel or like not thinking yeah. So I'm not bothered. I'm like, okay, moving on. I'm not that invested in it.
I know, but that sucks because I feel like that happens to a lot of queer characters is they get no backstory. So then when there's the big reveal, then fucking no one, like, people are just like so okay. On it.
Yeah, maybe that's it. And I think I got so much stuff between Azriel, Cassian, and Mor that I was like really interested in that dynamic and stuff. And so, I mean, it's like, yeah, it's nice that we have a bit of queer representation. Same with like one of the High Lords, like they mentioned at the High meeting that like it wasn't Helion, it was like a different one that has like a male lover. And so there's like a little bit of sprinkles there. Yeah. It's better than like zip zero nothing in Twilight, right? Like I'll take it.
Also, LOL at me calling him Helion.
Is it Helion?
I don't know.
We didn't listen to the audiobook for this one, ladies.
No, we didn't.
But I think like after this part, it's essentially the end. Like they like actually finally have this big battle. There's like a lot of gripes that I have just plot wise where I'm like, okay, whatever.
The interesting thing about this, the SJM last 100 pages is Azriel gives his knife, the truth teller, to Elaine, which is huge. Rhys comments that he has never given it to anyone before, and that it is Nesta and Elaine that actually do the like second last and last blow to King Hybern, which I thought was interesting that like it ends up being them. There's also the little bit that like Papa Archeron rules up with more armies and his boats are named after his 3 daughters and then immediately dies. It's his storyline. Speaking of more like kind of getting the short end of the stick, Papa Archeron really got the short end of the stick when he is just an absentee parent for 3 books, shows up and then immediately dies.
The Eagles in the Lord of the Rings effect, where at the very end the Eagles just come in and save Sam and Frodo. Otherwise they would have like been dead. It's like he literally just comes in with his Eagles. It's his boats named after his daughters. And there's like all this like, we didn't really get into it because it doesn't matter, but there's this human queen that's turned into a firebird, and which she was important to be able to like come.
That Lucian was looking for, and that Elaine riddled about.
But like essentially they were like, Lucian was like, I didn't even find her. Your dad had found her, and he'd been like doing all this stuff, and I was like, huh? Anyways, so yeah, there's so many.
You can send a correspondence, Papa Archeron. It's like clearly Sarah J. Maas at the end of this was just like, oh fuck, I don't want to bring him into the next couple books, but we need to wrap up his storyline, and he can't just like have like never to be seen again. So this is what happens. But anyways, like those are kind of like the main points. But then what happens, it really is Amryn like falls on the sword and is like, I'm okay. It's very Spike and Buffy in the series finale of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. She's like, I've had a good life. I'm okay to like sacrifice myself, and because I know that it'll end the war if I do that. Feyre realizes the cauldron gives everything life and everything needs to be restored. So Rhys like offers himself like to, I don't know. He dies. He literally dies.
For all of 2 seconds.
For all of 2 seconds, again, very ACOTAR coded, because the High Lords resurrect him and he pulls Amryn, just like he did Feyre, back into real life. Like,
yeah, he's like dead for 2 seconds, which is the classic SJM, like nobody actually dies, which is big part of, maybe not a big gripe, but like what doesn't give me the emotional 1-2 punch. Like big epic fantasy novels usually like a main character, and this was like a big war. Like, okay, I guess I was supposed to be sad and was sad that Suriel died, and that
I was sad. I cried.
Understandable.
I cried. I fucking cried that the Suriel died, just because it's such a sad death. But yeah.
But I feel like then the dad was supposed to be the other, like, this was the hard thing, but it was like, we don't care about him. Like, it would have been more interesting, actually, for one of the main cast to die.
Yeah.
And when I first read this, I was so in love with Rhysand. This was where I got about 80% of the way through. And I don't know if I like looked ahead or I saw a spoiler somewhere. This was like back in like 2017, 2018. And I thought I found out that Rhysand died, but I didn't.
But you didn't hear that he came back.
Literally, all I wanted to do was read one more page beyond that, and that's what made me stop it. And I said that makes me so angry and upset because I can't do character death, even though now I'm saying it would be great to have a character death. I can't do character death, and so I just didn't pick up I stopped reading. Like, I was like, I think he's gonna die, and I'm too upset about it, so I'm just not gonna read it.
That is so fucking funny.
He's alive 2 pages later.
Yeah, literally alive and well. And when the war ends and everything is, like, the cauldron is hidden with Miriam and Draken, another storyline that just did not have to happen. Feyre calls a meeting to discuss the treaty between human and Feyland. So we have this wrap up of, like, the 500-year kind of storyline, which I like. And we get this really cute moment where Rhys and Feyre, like, they're like, I couldn't have done this without you. Like, I loved standing by your side and, like, all of this stuff. Like, just so great. Rhys is so grateful that the war that he fought this time was with Feyre instead of by himself, all of this stuff. And so they're like, when we die, we will go together. Like, I can't have you die again. So now they both know what it's like for the other one to die. And then he goes, it's a bargain. And she's like, yeah. And then so she gets another tattoo. It's very cute.
I have no comment. This. No. Actar girlies are gonna know. You don't know because you haven't read it, Drew. But there's some good plants at the end.
This is why I love talking about the books when I actually have no idea what comes up, because you get to experience it like so pure the first time.
Yeah. Also, just throwback to like other things that were cringy in the battle scene, which was like Rhys transforming into like a Pokemon evolution. Like he like transformed into a beast and all these people.
I blocked that out of my memory.
Why? For what? Anyways, yeah. It wraps up happily ever after. And you're right, they do that, and then it's like literally done.
So let's get into our internet investigation. This is our cursory peruse of the internet of things you need to know. It's wild how little information there is about ACOWAR when there's so much on ACOTAR and ACOMAF. And I feel like Silver Flames, etc., there's just no one gives a fuck about this book. I really think that is the end all be all, the TLDR. Like, I was like trying to find like fun facts and trivia and like, just fun things to chat about. Couldn't find that at all.
It's funny that you say that. I don't know anything like interesting about this book particularly. Like, you said a couple things earlier where I'm like, oh, I can't wait for you to read that bonus chapter. Like, there's some interesting things post this, but I agree. There's not like, I don't know of anything off the top of my head where I'm like, this is interesting about ACOWAR.
They purposely did that, obviously, that the acronym of the book is a war.
Oh.
Did you not notice that? ACOWAR?
No, I mean, I know. Are they that clever? Are they that smart? I mean, I guess.
Yeah. She said she did it on purpose. You saw the list for names for Court of Mist and Fury.
That's something other than ACOMAF. ACOTAR sounds like something good. I don't know, something with tar. It just rolls off the tongue. ACOMAF. I'm getting my master's in fine arts. Like...
No, truly. Okay, our Wonder Whys. These are our unanswered questions for the listeners. First thing, I know you're a Lucian girly. Why does Lucian care so much about Feyre leaving Spring Court? You have been friends with this bitch for 6 months. Like, literally no time at all. And he's like, I know we weren't what you wanted and stuff like that. Like, why are you taking it so personally? She didn't even really hang out with you. Well, I guess she kind of did. They went hunting together. But it's like,
probably because here's my answer to you. You're like, wonder why. Probably because Tamlin has been like emotionally abusive, and like it's been his only friend for 500 years, and then Feyre came and they actually had so much fun banter and they were actual friends, and I think he like seriously was like, you were my friend. Like,
no, you're right, because if you also think about Beauty and the Beast, Tamlin is the beast, and so it's like he was locked up, unsure how to break the curse, upset, not having a good time.
And then Feyre saved them all.
Yeah.
And then Feyre saved them all.
You're like the biggest eye roll. And then Feyre saved them all.
No. So like he likes her for that, I think. And didn't always agree with. But I think that's a good, it's like a funny wonder why.
Yeah. Okay. My second one is that the magic in this series, like I said before, makes no sense. There's so many extra details that just are so unnecessary. And I hate it because... basically, you have to be like a fucking psycho reading it to understand what's going on. And I just like, I don't know, maybe people are smart. Maybe like maybe I'm more of an auditory learner or something, but like.
This is like classic fantasy stuff though. Like I think that this is like we're drawn to this a big part for the romance. I love fantasy. I talked about that before on the very first episode that I was on. Like I have been drawn to more fantasy than I was romance as a kid. And so there are some like really specific fantasy pieces that I think lend itself to that. And so there are that whole group of readers that are drawn towards the lore and keeping track of it and figuring it out. But there's also lots of gripes in the fandom, especially about like plot holes and magic magic. And so, I mean, I think you're not the only one who is curious and whose eyes kind of glaze over when you want to do the romance. And you haven't reread this one, but you had reread ACOTAR and a lot of, right, for the first one, and a lot of the fantasy pieces clicked for you, the lore pieces on your second read through. So give yourself,
right.
it's your first, it's the first read. Are you going to read it again? No, but that's okay.
No, I know, but I like almost feel like I have to, but it's like, should you have to read a second book? And also, people have to realize, the listeners have to realize, when I'm reading, I'm taking notes, I'm highlighting stuff, and I'm writing stuff down in a fucking 10 to 27 page outline, depending on the day. And so it's like, I'm also reading in a different way than like a normie would, and I still don't get it. Like, it's just...
No, that's fair.
Yeah,
I just like, wonder why.
Like, even with the Oberos mirror, it's like, couldn't of Bryaxis? No, it wasn't Bryaxis. The bone carver just been like, no, and then they try again, and he says yes.
No, you've got some good hard-hitting questions for the good, like, hard-hitting journalist questions.
I just want to know what's up with Tamlin and what's up with Lucian, Elaine, and Azriel. And what's up with Morn Azriel? And what's up with Cassian and Nesta? And stuff like that. Like, I understand, this is a minor spoiler, but the POVs change from Feyre to, like, multi-POV in the future books. And I'm stoked in the sense that I need to know what happens with these characters. And if it continues with Feyre, I won't get that. I am worried that it's hard to keep up. Like, I think dual POV is a lot easier, but like, I don't know. We'll see.
I was going to ask if you are excited, or if you truly, like, I think you'll do it because I've nagged you, and a lot of people say, no, you got to read the like Cassian Nesta one. But would you be done with this now? If you like, do you want to know what happens to the characters? Are you invested?
I do.
Or are you...
I do. Okay. I really like this world. I think I would like this book in a movie format, to be honest. But it just didn't hit for a book.
This one specifically, yeah. I think there's a lot more, like, in her head, kind of interesting things going on in the second one. Yeah, lots of good wonder whys, and some things will be answered for you.
Mm-hmm.
This is my just, like, random thoughts and a scene that we didn't get to talk about, because I wrote down basically there wasn't that many, but, like, fun Feyre recent interactions. And there is some, like, cutie scenes where she's so tired after trying to learn how to fly with Azriel, because, like, her whole body can't handle it. It's, like, so much tension in her muscles and stuff. And so he's like, Rhysand's, like, massaging her and helping her, like, relax from it, because she's, like, so in so much pain and so tired. And he says, will it ever stop? He mused, more to himself than me. This is sexy, not trigger warning, content warning. trigger warning to my emotions.
Yeah, like, people opt out now. Like,
yeah, at this point you're not opting out. So I'm just, oh my gosh. Will it ever stop? He mused, more to himself than me, as another finger joined the one sliding in and out of me with taunting, indolent strokes. Wanting you every hour, every breath. I don't think I can stand 1,000 years of this. My hips moved with him, driving him deeper. Think of how my productivity will plummet. Like, there's just, like, some cute... she still does write some fun lines for him, though he's no longer, like, the enemy. And I did like, there was a bit more of an exploration of some of the inner circle dynamics, and there's a part where Rhysand is like nervous for the first time during the High Lord meeting.
His hand is clammy for the first time. Yes.
And she has to, like, Feyre gets to support him through that, because there's also this big thorough storyline of him sacrificing himself and kind of, like, thinking that all of this has to be on his plate. And she's like, you do not have to do this alone, and, like, get over yourself also, because I want to do this with you, and you're not alone, and everyone loves you. And I'm like, my poor boy. So I like some of the character build that we get for Rhysand in this one. Other thoughts, just sometimes I want to know your opinion of this. Formal titles really give me the ick. Like, if it's like Your Highness or Your Lord or Master or Sir, or, like, whatever's going on a lot of the time in these books. But High Lord / High Lady does it for me. I'm here. Does it give you an ick or does it do it for you? Because anytime that Azriel's like, yeah, don't talk about that about my high lady, or or she's like, I'm giving this order as your high lady, and Reese is like, you can't do that. I'm actually telling you as your high lord, and or like Cassian like kneels down as like my lord.
I'm hit or miss. Like sometimes I'm like, oh cute, or and then I just move on, and sometimes I'm like, okay, but like also it's like with a power dynamic like this, it's like you're not like truly friends because there's this other,
That's an interesting thing to unpack.
like there's just this other thing that like especially with the way that Cassian and Azriel treat Feyre and Rhysand, like there's just this other, like you can't do that to you because you're my high lady, like when she like doesn't tell them where she goes and stuff like that, and like I don't know, it's weird. I don't know. I'm okay with it. It is what it is. I'm probably reading too much into it. I do like royal romances.
Mm-hmm.
Like I do kind of like some of the like royalty romances and stuff like that. So like this type of stuff doesn't bother me, but yeah, it's not like, I don't know, I'm neutral.
Okay, fair. So well, let's ask the listeners: does High Lord, High Lady do it for you, or does it give you the ick? That's a good question that we can ask on Insta.
Okay, I will add this. No, what does give me the ick is the lick, which is what
Rhysand wanting to
would
lick
say.
every part.
What gives me the ick is when every time they mention female and male, like because they're so human that I'm just like, why are you so like bio-essentialist? But it's like it's because they're actually more like animals, so it's like female, male, but because they look and talk and sound human, I'm like, why are you like transphobes? But it's like I know I know.
It's big,
but yeah, because I'm like, ew, I would never be like, oh, that group of males over there. Like that just sounds so gross. But like it is. I understand it's because they are like otherworldly creatures, but just because they look and talk
they're
and
humanoid.
feel so human, yeah, that it
And they don't
it gives me the
actually
ick.
and they don't actually explore any of the other like species of fae. Like there's this weird lore that like the Illyrians are fae, but actually they're just like humans with, wings.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
because they're technically fae, but they don't call themselves fae. And then,
And like then there's monsters and stuff like that. So there's just like there's so
but you still could go, it's the same thing where I'm like, everybody is like described as white or off white and like
olive skin toned.
and 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 transphobic or just like not trans inclusive where I'm like you have a fantasy world, you really could do something with this, different body sizes, different genders, different ways of like knowing the world. It's fine. It's like you don't, every author doesn't have to set out to do that, but it would be like it's more open and interesting in a fantasy world where anything can go and you can build your own world, that you could put something like that in. And like why are all the fays just like, yeah, they model themselves after humans? Okay.
And like and a very certain type of human. I was also gonna say, were you disappointed at that aspect of Moore's storyline, that it's like Feyre was like still like, are you nervous that, because like there's no, up until this point there's no prejudice against queer people, there's no like Tarquin is like a person of color, it's written that way, and it's like there's no racial tensions or anything like that. So like were you disappointed that like Feyre was brought up that there is like homophobia in this world?
Yeah, that's funny. That's a good question. Again, I'm just like so ambivalent about that whole thing. And again, maybe because I
Mm-hmm.
just don't think that they did a good enough, she did a good enough job by Moore in that space. And maybe I'd love to be proved wrong and like see what else comes forward from it and what happens when she comes out. But I know that there was like a little piece. The only thing that I'm aware of, yeah, like obviously homophobia is real and alive. And I wonder why, about like if anything has to do with her sexuality, with what went down with Eris when she was betrothed to him and then she slept with Cassian so that she didn't have to, so that she was like kind of sullied because her virginity was, this big thing to be sold off. And then Eris leaves her, but there's some quotes from him in this one when he's talking where he's like,
Yeah, that like
you
you
don't
don't
know
know
what
the whole
happened.
story.
You
Yeah.
don't know the whole story and you don't know what happened. So I wonder if there's something maybe being planted there. And yeah, is the homophobia just that she's worried about what her dad would say? She's like, I know that like no one would judge me.
Yeah, Feyre's like, well, you could like live as a queer person in Valaris, like no one would, like you would be accepted there. So I just inferred that there are places that she wouldn't be accepted.
Right,
But we
right.
also just see like it's so, like you would be like if I wrote a book where it's like Sarah J. Maas is like maybe a straight woman, I don't know, but like a straight cisgendered woman, a white woman, and so it's like we get those lenses in this book,
Mm-hmm.
and so all of the other writing is from that lens.
Yeah,
So
a hundred
yeah,
percent, 100%. And it's like, yeah, Feyre is Feyre supposed to be white, and she's the one who clocks that Lucian has a darker complexion, so that's why. Because Helian's black, and they're like state that, pretty. She states that like more obviously, and then it's like Lucian's mom is white, and so he has a darker complexion. Like
right.
nobody could clock that he was. So,
Yeah,
anyways,
why? Well, and also fan art. Like I feel like people draw him so white.
yeah, and probably I've seen a lot of fan art where it's not as white, but also I think there's this assumption that he is white passing. Otherwise,
Right.
they would know that he wasn't
Right.
his
Helion or Helion's son.
exactly
Right,
because
right.
at least the idea is that everyone knows that he's the seventh son of the Autumn Court Lady and Baron. Gripes.
Gripes and grumbles are nitpicky problems with the books. Speaking of like boy and girls, Amryn, for some reason in this book, after every fucking sentence she says boy or
Girl.
girl. That wasn't in that wasn't in Akamath.
It was. We didn't talk about it, and it's she maybe didn't talk as much or whatever. But it's the same thing with the vulgar gestures and
Yeah, the
cutting
rip
to
to
ribbons.
ribbons.
She does the girl like, yeah, you fool, you stupid girl. Oh, okay, boy. It's because she's supposed to be like, I don't know,
Flippant.
10 bajillion years old. Like everyone's
Yeah.
quite young to her, but it gives me the ick for real. It's like not a conversational pattern or like character voice that I'm into. Because I like Amryn, but not this.
SJM needs a new editor, is all I'm going to say. Like, I feel like.
I know some of your listeners have been like, can't wait for you to read Crescent City. And like the joke that I always sent to your reply to is like, you're not going to read that. But there's also characters that like also use all this, do the like, okay, girl, okay, boy in those series too. And I'm like, the editor is needed. Different voices
Yeah,
of characters are desperately needed. Anyways, I'll leave it at that.
totally, totally. I'm still annoyed at Feyre going so below the belt with more because also I just feel like in stories, and maybe I'm just thinking of one in particular, but it's like when characters do something bad and then they apologize and then the other character has to like reveal something about I don't know. I just like I'm just annoyed about that whole scene. Basically, it's just I can't
I
stop
know.
talking about it. Oh, the last gripe I just have is just that like the first two books were so thrilling, and I love Face End so much, and this just seems so disappointing that this is like I know it's not the end of their story because we have more books, but like it is kind of the end of I feel like their like story at to this point. Again, I highly doubt the future SJM books are going to be from their point of view, and like that just sucks because I'm like they had such a good run and it just sucks that it was
Nah, the gas is
so
empty.
boring.
I'm
I
ready.
know.
I'm ready to move on. Again, it's just the tension of not being together
Yeah.
that builds and which is more interesting to me. My gripes and grumbles are, which we already talked about, the pairing up or hinting of Elaine and Asriel, Nesta and Cassian, and Race and Farah. Like, it could have been a little bit more interesting to not have the three Bat Boys line up with the three sisters.
Don't get me started. If that actually comes to fruition, I will burn all of these books. Like,
Valid. Yeah, it's just like a little bit like gripes and grumbles about Jurian being on their side the whole time. Sorry, literally, Farah, you could have looked in his mind once. I think he even says, "You
why
never
didn't
looked.
you look in my mind? I
You
know,
never
I
looked in my
know,
mind at
I
any
know,
point, you idiots." And I'm just
I
like, "Yeah,
know.
you idiots."
Thank you for bringing that up.
Mind reading is too powerful of a gift, like a power in a novel where there need to be secrets to like have reveals. And so I think that's just something that she had to address. I'm like glad that he said at least, because you're kind of sitting there going like, plot hole, why didn't they do that? And then my last gripe and grumble that I wrote down anyways was multiple times, anytime they're in Valeris, they reference the sound of children in the streets. And I'm like, how many children,
What children?
how many children are running around outside this townhouse right now?
Literally, I know they're just trying to be like, it's a bustling, thriving city, but I'm like, we've never met a child in this entire series. It's so funny. I know.
Because Lucian clocks it. He's like, there's children running in the streets. Later on, there's something about children in the streets. When she first gets there, there's like sound of children in the streets, which is like this like idea that Valeris. And I'm just like, how many children?
That's a good catch.
It's really funny. It's really funny. And I guess I don't have any other grapes and grumbles other than like give me the Asriel and Eris novel. I've like read like 100,000 plus word fanfics of them. Like there's some really good content because it's hard to find because it's so heterosexual. Like in all the pairings from this series, like there's a lot of more fandoms that I'm involved in where there just seems to be more, I don't know, accessibility of queer pairings or different imaginings of characters, and I'm like sometimes surprised at the lack of it in the ACOTAR fandom from what I've looked through, because I thought that there would be so much more Bat Boy stuff just because of all the like even flirty things that they've said to each other or like funny little jokes, and like there's there's some, but just whether or not I like appreciate the quality of the writing. But it seems like the well-written fanfic writers are drawn towards the Asriel Eris thing. So I'll just continue to wear my little tin hat for that.
I'm loving that because, like I said before, Asriel, I feel like after having a story like him pining over more for 500 years, I think there needs to be something crazy. And Elaine just seems like not... Like, there needs to be something, like, that would just, like, blow everyone's mind. Whereas, like, if it's Elaine, it would just be like, meh, meh. Like,
I can't wait to talk to you once you've read Silver Flames. Well, we'll do the novella first because it chronologically comes. But we can read in 30 minutes. I can't wait to hear your opinions on
I'm so excited. Okay, Sequels Group, this is the tea on any upcoming sequel seasons and the general reception. It did really well. It won Goodreads 2017 Young Adult Fantasy and Science Fiction Award. I found out, maybe this was a little bit of half-ass internet research, but like that, it's being removed from school libraries in southern states due to its explicit content, which it's like, LOL, we could talk about that for like an entire episode about censorship around books. But I will say a lot of it, when it first came out, seems like it was published under YA when it's very clearly NA. And it's because it seemed like it wasn't very successful in the NA category. So they published it as YA, or they like marketed it as YA or whatever. But now it is like firmly in the NA categories.
And what's NA stand for?
Sorry, new adult.
New adult. Yeah, I think you'll see the clear crossover when you read Silver Flames, which I'm sure is not really spoilers. People just know it's a lot more explicit. She like came out of the gates with explicit content for Silver. Oh, it's gonna be fun. We're gonna have fun. I just
endured 700 pages of blood, sweat, and dirt. Like, I deserve some good sex scenes. Like, Jesus Christ. And we talked about this, but there is a TV show in the works, and you were a naysayer. I was excited for it. And in February 2024, I think this happened after we recorded our Akamath episode, but it was announced that the adaptation had been scrapped. So then some people were rejoicing and some people were really upset. But apparently it's still going. It's just maybe getting shopped around to other networks, which I would be fine with because, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was picked up by, I think, Hulu. And I'm like, it definitely needs to be HBO. It needs that HBO budget. It needs the explicitness of HBO.
I just want it to be like animated.
Yes, I would like an animated series. So with reboots and adaptations, I'm kind of on the fence of I just like more content, so I'm happy with it regardless if it's fucking shite or not.
No, I love it too. I mean, I guess I'm distant enough now where it's not the same fervor I had for it. It's not the same fervor that I did have for it when I first read them. And I think if I was a teenager reading these, like it would have mattered to me a lot more. Now, you're right, just like content would be fun, but I still am not convinced that it wouldn't be like so absolutely terrible. Like, don't you see those like?
Again, Ronald D. Moore
I know. You said
did
you're
so good, especially because he was really the driver of season 1 of Outlander. And if you've read the book and watched season 1, it's insane. His involvement with Outlander, I think after season 2, he moved on to something else. But like, again, the only reason why I'm so hyped about it is Ronald D. Moore, I think, is a genius. Like, seriously, he did, especially with the romance genre, like, he did so well.
if they knew how to actually adapt it, I'll
Yeah.
stay on the train. If they knew how to adapt it, like actually take like 99% of the fantasy elements out of it, and like I'm invested. I just don't think that a lot of TV shows can do the
You're right.
fantasy.
The fantasy would be tough because Outlander, he also like literally just like moved to Scotland for like years. Like he was so that was I think depicting the Scottish Highlands is a lot different than this
That's what I
novel.
mean.
So I totally get that. But like if there's anyone, he also worked on Battleship Galactica for like he's
So a bit of
the
fantasy.
yeah. So I
You're
that's
excited.
I'm excited. That's the thing that's like keeping me going. So yeah, still a little bit of mystery around whether that's actually going to happen. But we saw Sarah J. Maas get lunch with Margot Robbie in New York in March 2024. So like early March. So I don't know, maybe it could get picked up by her production company.
People, yeah, I know people were talking for sure.
I don't think she would play any of the characters. I think it would be like something that she
I
would
hope not
produce.
for Margot Robbie. I think that she knows to not do that. Or if she did, I'd be like, then I'm much more on board. I'm like, okay, Margot Robbie's gonna be in it. No, no, it's good. Overall, I'm gonna give it one like bat wing out of two. Like it's just it's just like
It is what it is. It's kind of like one of those books that you just it's like when you're reading Twilight and you like just kind of have to read Breaking Dawn. Like whereas like the first 3 are like so good and then like
bangers.
yeah, there's always one stinker in the group.
People really love this one for the fantasy world building elements and other stuff. So would also be interested to know from maybe listeners like what's your favorite of 1, 2, and 3, since that's all we've read so far, or that you've read. You know, which one hits the best? Which one's your favorite? I mean, I'm not surprised if Akamath takes it, but I'd be curious, what do people like about Aquar if it's your favorite?
Because we can't seem to fucking come up with one answer.
So funny. But this was fun. I like I'm glad you finally read it. You know what happens. And now it's very interesting. There are a lot of Wonder Buys. There's no big plot hanging. So you kind of get we're gonna go in fresh for the little novella, which I think you're
Totally.
gonna like. It's very like cutesy. There's no fan it's like it's cutesy.
And the next book is A Court of Frost and Starlight, which is a novella that covers the group after the war and I guess before the events of A Court of Silver Flames. And I'm really excited. I actually think strategically this was a really good idea because Sarah J. Maas, like they took a fun read, but it went very fantasy, and this kind of brings it back maybe to some more lighthearted moments. So I'm very, very excited for that. We have 2 listener questions. One is a voicemail, so I'm going to play that for us.
Hello. So I'm the one that sent the DM about Wings and Ruin, just kind of not really doing it for me. And I have a lot to say, but I'll keep it short. I think with Wings and Ruin just is such like a hangover feel from Mist and Fury, which was just so good. I almost DNF'd ACOTAR, but then Mist and Fury itself was really like a page turner for me, and then Wings and Ruin was just so slow. It just felt really sluggish. It's, a 700-page book, and Sarah J. Maas just did not prove to me that each one of those 700 pages was warranted. I feel like chapters like 40 to like 60 just did not need to be in there. I don't know. It just felt like there was a lot of her trying to tie loose ends together, and the ending was like fairly good. I like all the way that different background characters kind of came together for the battle, but I don't know, just getting there, the payoff just almost didn't feel like it was worth it. Also, Feyre and Rhysand are absolutely miserable as a couple. Like, I'm sure they're happy. I hate them. They're so annoying at this point. Anyway, love the podcast. I'm excited to see what you have to say about it.
Thank you, Natalie. Thanks for the voicemail. Lots of things to address in this one.
Yes, and yes. I wrote note earlier in my notes that I didn't talk about as we were going, but there's one point where they're very lovey-dovey, Feyre and Rhysand, like before the High Lord meeting or whatever, and I'm like, get over it. Like, there are these little moments that I pulled of the romance and the sexiness and stuff, but like, yeah, they're miserable. Like, I'm so bored with them in this one, and so I agree, Natalie.
Yeah, they just repeat the same shit, like about like why in the last third of this book are we still having a conversation with Feyre about how Rhys lets you do whatever you want to do? Like, why? Like, it's just the same repetitive thing, and I just found that like all of their
Well, the only interesting thing which we already talked about was like there's interesting of like relationship dynamic when they kind of get into a fight and they talk about how do they address each other in front of everybody and like how are they like a united front or not, like that. Like if there was a bit more of that, I would have been interested, like continue to interested. But I am so ready for not their perspective or point of view after this. So yeah, I really like that.
Yeah, that was good. Sorry, I really liked how Natalie described it as a hangover book. Like, that's how I felt. Like, I was riding such a high. Because it's like, this is, I would say, like, this series might be, like, a top 10 series for me. And it's like, when I put off reading this book, like, multiple times. And once I started and got into it, you know, I continued reading. And I was enjoying myself and stuff like that. But, like, man, oh man, when I was like, there was weekends, like a few weekends in March where I was like, I need to read this book because it's 700 pages and I gotta get ready for our episode. And like, I was like, oh, I could clean my kitchen. And it's like, if you're having those thoughts about, you know, cleaning your kitchen, etc., to put off reading a book, like your favorite hobby, like that.
Don't worry, it's only flopped so far. It's there's other stuff that's fun.
I can't wait to ramp up in Silver Flames. Our second question is from @red_fox. I think Feyre was very unlike herself at the High Lord gathering to Tamlin's comments. She looked kind of like a coward. What do you think of that scene? I was like a little surprised that she didn't like, you know, like she's the one that fingered Amarantha and like threw her shoe at Rhysand and stuff like that. I was kind of surprised that she didn't like have a biting retort to Tamlin.
But she's kind of like, she's like quite upset about it, right? And
yeah,
I see what this listener is saying. I just think also it's really on her mind the whole like, is she politically going to be hiding her powers? And she didn't have to worry about that before when she was kind of a bit more feisty. And this one, like they really talked it through about like if it's okay, if they should hold her powers, if that's going to be bad or good for them to get all these high lords on the plate. So I think she was just, and it's the first time she's been like high lady in front of a bunch of people. So she's like, it's on her mind.
And I also just think there's a reason misogyny is alive and well. And I get that that's the system of oppression that Sarah J. Maas feels closest to. So she talks about it a lot. And that's like a thread throughout this entire series. But like, remember that all the High Lords did not grant their partners High Lord or High Lady status. So it's like, she's also like this anomaly in that sense. Also, it's like they've all known each other for hundreds of years. She's like fucking 20 years old.
But I did kind of want some.
I did want the finger like to the throw the bone like Amarantha. Like I did want, you're like at Red Fox, completely agree. Like I wanted some kind of scathing response, but I do understand maybe why it was written this way.
Agreed.
And there we
go. Another one for the book.
I can't believe it. Another one done and dusted. And thanks for sticking with us. Thanks so much, Megan, for coming on. This was a joy.
Love it.
And that's the story of A Court of Wings and Ruin. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you to Megan for joining me on today's episode. If you've been enjoying the pod, please subscribe on Apple or Spotify and leave a rating and review. If you don't know what to put in the review, you can tell people that you like the books or you like the commentary or the humor or whatever it is that's drawing you to this podcast. It's super helpful for other people to see that other people like it, so they click play. You can also suggest a book or leave a voicemail and get your question or comment responded to on the next episode via the links in the episode show notes. If you have done any of these things so far, I appreciate you so much. Our next episode is the fine print. Until then, happy reading. For Ready to be Romanced, I'm Torry. Goodbye.